Hi everyone, and welcome to another Destiny Movie Night Hangout. And tonight I have with me two guests to discuss the Hunger Games. This movie is actually a trilogy that is based on Susan Collins' novels. And the timing is excellent because the third movie has just came out, so we're going to have some interesting perspectives from our guests. And also, one of them, which I will introduce to you shortly, has also read the 3 books. So this is a promising show, and just giving you some housekeeping announcements. You can ask your questions during the live session. So you actually have a Q&A box in your Google Plus app, and you can send it to us during the live session, and we're going to try to answer to you as best as possible. And without further ado, let me introduce you to our guests tonight. And we have from Sweden, in Uppsala, we have Anna. Hello, Anna. How are you doing?
Hi, everyone. I'm very glad to be here talking about these movies. Looking forward to it.
Thank you. And we have Jürgen from Miami in the US. Hey,
Hi. Hello.
Thanks, guys. So just before we start with our discussion, I wanted to just give some helpful information about these movies. So the Hunger Games happen in a kind of futuristic society and a totalitarian regime that is ruled by the capital. And this nation is divided in 12 districts, and every year we have representatives of each district to run these Hunger Games, where they are there to basically destroy the opponents and see who the winner is, and that winner will represent will be proud of the district and will actually have a luxurious life and be like a celebrity amongst this nation. But apart, not only the Hunger Games is such an intensive game in itself, where they have different tasks to run for, but it's live broadcasted, and people from the different districts are kind of obliged to watch it and to be part of this whole success. And the story, the first story started when Katniss is actually volunteered to participate, and her whole personality and this main character kind of will change the shape of the games throughout the next 2 movies. Right, so guys, in this hangout we're actually going to focus, we're going to give the Destonian perspective, and the audience will understand a little bit more what we say by that. And when I was preparing this hangout, I was asking myself the question, what are we hungry for? I mean, we talk about Hunger Games, right? But in the movie, we see so much in terms of inputs of power, pride, courage, survival, all these various instincts that this personalities bring forward. And so I think it will be important in our hangout to discuss how this whole environment is actually influencing us, and how we can bring it back to our reality and understand the patterns, and obviously help ourselves to understand this world a little bit better and our own lives. So my first question to you guys, and I'll start with Jürgen, if you want to give me your perspective, what was the main point in the movie that resonated with you, and why?
I read the books, and it was really interesting to read. I mean, I could talk about many things. Right now, one thing that I remember that I really was interested in is how, if you look at the books, I mean, I remember from history that you have the Roman Colosseum and different scenarios, situations where even today, in today's times, where people sort of watch violence on purpose, as a form of entertainment. And when you have that situation, it's in the books, it's really representing something that's part of what's happening right now. It's in part of our history, and it's also happening right now. And the books show that really clearly as showing the games as this thing that where people kill each other as a point of entertainment, and it's just really interesting how you can sort of draw parallels between the books, the story, the fictional world, and what's happening right now. So it's pretty interesting.
Thanks, Jürgen. How about you, Anna?
Well, for me, the point that I noticed the most, or what I like about these movies, you could say, is that I find that the movies are very reflective of the world that we're living in and the reality that we're living in, but it's presented in a very extreme and very like a caricature kind of way, where you have these extreme costumes and these extreme inequalities, and where you get to see and this is also, you could say, the Destonian perspective is where we look a little bit deeper than just seeing, oh, they're wearing these ridiculous costumes, but actually seeing, hey, but those ridiculous costumes, you can actually see them here, that we in the West are wearing these like elaborate fur coats and fashion designers, and then you have people in other parts of the world that are just wearing whatever they can get a hold of and wearing it for years because they don't have any money. And that inequality, for example, that is very well reflected in the movie. So in a way, I wouldn't even say that it's a future society. It could be, of course, but it's almost like a parallel universe that can show us a lot of the ridiculous and abusive things that we're doing to ourselves and each other in this world.
Thank you. Yes, I can relate to that. In fact, yes, it's like a futuristic society, but it happens here in terms of just because they have all these like different buildings and a super fast train, etc. But at the same time, we can bring these points. And I mean, I also, when I was watching it, I was like, well, this is taken to the extreme, perhaps for people to see what we are actually already doing. It was almost like at some point I was actually laughing at certain things that they will do. Is like definitely taking to the extreme, but almost as a red flag for us to see. And this is actually going to take me to another point that I wanted us to discuss tonight, guys. This sense of justice in the movie, it is extremely twisted. I mean, at the beginning of the movies, they were talking about this, the story. Like first there was a world with a lot of war, and then they had to find these like a balanced piece to keep everyone apparently happy. Obviously, it's not how it actually happened. But I wanted to ask you, what were like the main elements in the movie that project this notion of trapped freedom, and that it's also characteristic of our own nature? If that makes sense, like what characteristics in the movie did you relate to this twisted notion of justice and power? Anna, do you want to go ahead?
Well, one of the things that there is this dictator basically in the movie, who is President Snow, the character President Snow, and at some point he explains why these Hunger Games, why they exist. So basically, and it's mostly like children and young people who are forced to go into do these games that all the other people are then sitting and watching and being entertained by, and they're being made into these celebrities, but they don't want to be there, and the whole purpose is for them to kill each other until only one of them stands. And then he explains, like in a very charismatic way to all the people, like you said, because they're obliged to watch the television. He explains that, we're doing this to remind ourselves of our forgiveness of each other. So every year we're forcing 12 young people, children, there's also an older woman at some point, we're forcing them into this really brutal game that we call it, where they have to kill each other until one is left, and that is then somehow reminding us that we're all standing together and that we're all together in this. I mean, that is twisted.
Yeah, indeed. Jürgen, do you want to add anything to it?
Yeah. So yeah, I totally see what Anna said. And there's also something else in the movie that I can see also as another form of twisted justice. So in the movies, there's this idea of, I guess, the capital. Oh, okay. So the idea of the capital of evil, right? And so, in people's minds, in the movie, it plays out that, okay, well, we have to fight, you know, fire with fire, have a war with the capital, and that's somehow justice to somehow kill your enemies and just destroy them. And for me, I see that as a form of twisted justice because, I mean, that's not really a solution to just kill the people that you disagree with or that are even have wronged you in the past, you know. So I don't know. I don't think I can say it more plainly than that.
Yeah, it's almost like a common trauma that keeps people in fear, like, and that's not exactly the best definition of justice if we want to talk about that, right? So yeah, I think.
Can I add? Just one more thing I remembered is that that's something else that this President Snow, he says that because you have the capital and then you have all the other districts, and each district is responsible for producing one resource. So you have the miners, you have the people working with wood and so forth. And so he says at one point, and in the capital they're basically just like drinking and whoring and eating. They eat so much that they have this pill they take so that they vomit so that they can eat more. It's really extreme. And then he says, the capital is the heart of the country, and all you other people who are really poor and they're starving and they're working slave labor, you are feeding the heart. You're the blood that is nurturing the heart, and in exchange we protect you. So there's created this like false sense of security. It's basically one of those situations where you have some like neighborhood bully that is taking protection money from people so that he protects them from not beating them up himself. It's kind of that situation, which is also an interesting point to reflect back to our own society, that which claims to protect us is actually what we need to be protected from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely, Anna. And I mean, actually, when we're talking, this reminds me like this idea of them, well, what the president wanted is like for them to be proud of their own district. Like each young person should be proud of being part of this nation and supporting the capital and making everything working, obviously not working for themselves, but working for this minority. And we all see that inequality playing out. And this, it's quite a tricky element, this courage and pride that is promoted amongst the youth in the movie. And I mean, I read some reviews of people saying, oh, this is absolutely horrible. They're putting these children fighting with each other. It's promoting this war amongst the children. But if I bring back some other points in our world, such as child soldiers, I mean, there have been people manifesting against it, but this movie represents a pretty interesting analogy of how kids are actually brought into these war games. So, Jürgen, would you like to talk a little bit about this courage point and how this is ingrained in the children's mindset in a brainwashing campaign, and what is the role of adults in the middle of all of that?
Okay, so yeah, that's something I can talk about. So you can look at nations today, like whatever nation you think of, pretty much all nations have an army, right? They have what they call national pride. You look at USA as an example. So, the military here is pretty glorified among many people, and you can see how within that, as children, you can enlist for the military and see it as this great service and as something prideful to die for your country, to fight for your country. And when you really look at it, when we look at the point, I mean, children are going to be adults. I mean, the only difference is some number of years. If you take a 14-year-old kid, you wait 10 years, she's going to be 24. And every single soldier, believe it or not, they're once a child. So, that's why in some countries you can take children very young, maybe 10, 12, and you pretty start training them for the military, and that's how it works. So I mean, yeah. So it's this whole. It is like a brainwashing point, because brainwashing is purely a point of would you educate people, and whether they really believe within you, within what they're doing as a soldier for dying for your country. And there's no real, you could say, freedom or choice, because you would have to have other options or other perspectives or other viewpoints about life out there, and also about who you're killing and what you're dying for, and like what is really the consequences of that. And as this relates to the movie, and there are 12 districts, right? 12 districts, and the first two districts, District 1 and 2, I think they're 1 and 2, they're called the champion districts, and those two districts, there are people, the younger kids, who train their whole life for the games, and those two districts usually win the games every year, mostly every year, because those kids, they actually volunteer every year for the games, and so they're actually trying to they're training to like win the games, like kill these other people, for the purpose of winning. And that, I think, is a perfect symbol for a country that is very militaristic, that trains themselves to win, to be able to win by conquest. And
yeah, cool, Jürgen. It's like where fighting and this concept of courage becomes a way of life, and it's a state of mind, and the way it is done, it's quite successful, right? Anna, would you like to add anything to what Jürgen just said?
Yeah, because what also happens is that Katniss, who is the main character, who is also a female heroine, she's the center of this entire process. And what happens is that she volunteers so that her younger sister doesn't have to go into these games, and she is celebrated as this amazing martyr. So from that perspective, that is also what the movie is promoting. That if you take it upon yourself to go into war, knowing that there is, like, she basically goes into it, and everyone thinks that she's going to get killed. So that's how you go into it, and it is presented as something that is courageous and honorable for her to do. She becomes a celebrity. She gets these amazing dresses and all of this fame because she did that action.
Yeah, and at the same time, she's representing the oppressed people, right? It's like a way of, people see it as a way of her to bring forth some, like a new, a new kind of winner, because she came from a poor background in a district, like the last district, so it was actually the poorest people there, and she was like from survival to the other polarity, which is success and being part of the elite, let's say. So yeah, very cool points there, guys. Just before I move on, I just got a comment live, so thank you, Francisco, for sending us that comment. I mean, actually, I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Joanna, but if you have any question regarding this movie, please feel free to send us through. And everyone else, if you have any questions or any comments, we're happy to take them, and you're all welcome to be part of the discussion. So let's move on now, talking about, like, one thing about in terms of us walking our process and becoming aware of ourselves and our reality. If we bring this movie back to ourselves in terms of the patterns and the personalities that all these characters in the movie represent, what would you say regarding this survival pattern, and how they are all fighting for something, right? So what is this movie telling about ourselves, about our own kind of as a mirror of us in this world? So guys, who wants to take this one?
Well, someone who's a really good example of that in the movies initially, or that's how you think he is initially, is the character called Haymitch. And he was a former winner of the games, and he's basically, his life is set now. you then discover that it's not a wonderful life as you would think, because he's moved out of poverty and he now has access to resources. But he's actually a terrible drunk, and he's placed in the position of taking care of these kids and showing them how to survive, but he just doesn't give a crap about them. He just wants to drink. Like, he's completely given up. And something that I was looking at is that is very characteristic. That is one sort of, you could say, survival mechanism that we take on, that some people go into. It's like there are these various survival mechanisms in terms of how we cope with living in this world, and living in a world where, from his perspective, there's no hope, there's no point in doing anything, it's all just doesn't matter, so I might as well just drink myself to death. What is then cool is that this character actually starts standing up from that throughout the movies. But that is a very typical character that we see in our world, which could be, for example, that you fall into addiction and you just give up and you become this like bitter person, when you could have actually given something to others. You know, he had this experience and he had a lot of skills, which he then also starts opening up. But in the beginning, you see him as this very discouraged and broken human being.
Yeah, very cool example. And it also reminds me, Elfie, then you have the other lady that dresses all those extravagant clothes and
Effie.
lots of makeup. Yes, Elfie, like she dresses up and puts all of those clothes and stuff, but in the end it's all a mask. She doesn't seem to enjoy what she's doing. She's actually, I don't know, it's like it's a perfect representation of when you're doing something that you understand it's completely against what she's just not doing anything to help those people or to improve anyone's life, but it's her job. It's like just that's her job.
Well, the thing with her is that she's all about appearance. She's in a constant state of fear. You know, that's another symptom of existing in a symptom in a system of survival, is that she's constantly like anxious and jittery about everyone looking good and being presentable. And what's interesting about her character, I don't know, and maybe Jochen can share something from the books that we didn't see in the movies, because often characters in books are more complex, but in the movies you can see that there's actually a real human being behind that, wanting to be presentable and everything has to look like, you can see that there's an inner struggle where she has integrity, but maybe she's too afraid of actually living and expressing that.
It's actually kind of funny that so the character Katniss, the book's written from her perspective, so you see what she thinks. So she's actually pretty annoyed by Effie throughout many of the books, but there was like a few moments where she sort of, I mean, so exactly how you described it, she's very superficial. Katniss does see that, and she's actually very annoyed by Effie. But there's like one or two moments in the book where she actually sort of connect. It was like a very brief moment, but you're right. It's mostly throughout the book she's very much like a mask. You know, it's very much about the appearance.
And then you have Katniss, which is, our heroine. And this is also what's so cool about, looking at a movie with Destonian eyes, which basically means that we see beyond the immediate layer of what is being presented to us. And this is also because we are investigating our own minds. So that means that because we have investigated more layers in ourselves, we can also see more layers in these characters. And for example, with Katniss, she's also consumed by, self-interest. She's all about her own family, her own love interest, and she says this often, like she just want to save her own people. Like she doesn't care about saving the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's another character, like Peter's character. It's like, at least, I mean, I haven't watched the third movie, so Anna, please add your input here. But at least from the first two movies, you see that he has this also sacrifice personality, and at some point he says that Katniss should win because he has nothing to live for. And this is also very an existing pattern in our society where we kind of say to ourselves that these self-destructive thoughts, and we think that if we don't have a family or if we don't have a boyfriend or a girlfriend, then we are hopeless, and we don't have anything to live for, and we actually forgetting that it's our own life. We as human beings, and how equal we are all in this society, in this world. So Anna, would you like to add something to it? I saw you were taking some notes there.
Yeah, that's actually, I've actually find that that's very interesting, because that's kind of the again, another dimension of a symptom of survival is where you go like, well, because she's like this amazing, radiant, beautiful girl who's so strong, and he's this kind of little quirky, nerdy, not very tall guy, who's not very noticeable. And so that could be like an element, that he's like, he becomes a shadow, and in seeing how amazing she is, because he also falls in love with her, he doesn't see his own qualities, and he doesn't see how he actually has some amazing qualities of his own.
Yeah,
and so he squanders that, to save this amazing girl.
And he goes into comparison, and like from that moment onwards, we realize how actually love relationships are based from this unequal starting point, where he's actually admiring her, and from the beginning, she was actually like ignoring him based on a memory that she had where he actually ignored her in the past. So this is like a snowball. I mean, there's so many dimensions that we could discuss during this hangout. But guys, Jürgen, do you have anything to add regarding the personalities before we move on?
About the personalities, like how the mirror. Was that the mirror part?
Yeah. I mean, if there's anything you want to add to what Anna and I just said.
Sure. So one thing about the books, like in the books, they go more to how Peeta and Katniss relate. So yeah, a lot of what Peeta would live for is basically for Katniss. So it is that very stereotypical, like you live for another person, and yeah, you forget about yourself. So I mean, yeah, like that obviously is a very destructive pattern. There's also like a slightly positive side, meaning for Katniss, she can at least use Peeta as a mirror for herself to see what value she has in herself. So obviously, if she were to totally find all of her value within what he saw, then it's also not very helpful. But there's that potential where two people can sort of show each other the good within each of them, but then they have to sort of take that and sort of make that real and live that for themselves. The books go into that a bit if you're interested in the books about more of the relationship dynamics. There's a lot of that. It's pretty interesting. Oh, one more thing. One thing that is in the books too is how Katniss has a father, and she references him a lot throughout the books. And he actually like gave her lots of. He trained her to hunt and to like, what she was able to do with the bow and everything. So there's a lot of cool history there. Anyway.
Yeah, and you can also see how she's a tomboy in the movies. It's very obvious.
Yeah, climbing up the trees, etc. Cool. Thanks for that input. I mean, I haven't read the books either, so that's definitely helpful.
Oh, and in the third movie,
yeah.
Without giving any spoilers, I will just say that I was very surprised that. Because in the first two movies you have this like very typical romantic triangle thing going on. But then in the third movie it actually becomes a lot more complex, and you see a completely different side of Katniss as well, where she kind of becomes neurotic yeah, well, anyway, I'm not going to give any spoilers, but it's very interesting, I will say that.
Cool, because it's also almost like the evolution of relationships, like relationships as we know them, right? That can take these extreme directions and become these nightmares relationships instead of being supportive. And just to finalize what Jürgen was saying is the importance of when I was watching this movie, there's much to learn from these characters. I mean, the fact that they focus into something and they're good at what they do, and they can you see sometimes this cooperation, but at the same time there's also this interest behind it, which was getting these partnerships again for survival, and how sometimes friendships are nothing more or less than that, where people are not actually caring about each other or learning with each other. So there's definitely lots to take on from these characters now. Right, we have about 10 minutes left. I was just going to remind everyone that you can send us your questions or comments regarding the Hunger Games, both the movies and the books. Right, Anna, one question that I want to expand with you is in regards to the starting point of this movie. I mean, we see like there has been a big investment from Hollywood and all these movie producers into making this movie that if we look at it from a kind of a political and also economic perspective, it also give us some heads up into the elite and how the system works, and brings and can instigate a kind of a revolution against the elite. So what do you think is behind all of this? And just to add to that, I was reading in a review that in order to find out what this movie is all about, just follow the money behind the images. So, yeah. What's your perspective?
Yeah, so this is something that I find to be very important when we watch movies. And here you also have to look at that the Hunger Games, the whole theme of the young people or the people doing the revolution against the elite is a very common theme these days. There's the Snowpiercer movie, there's a lot of other movies that has the exact same theme, okay? And then, you know, at the surface level, we've discussed this before actually, but you would maybe say, oh, but isn't that cool, you know, that the revolution and now everyone is seeing it and it's coming through in the movies. That would be like maybe an obvious thing to say, that, well, it's so great, you know, that this is finally coming through into Hollywood. But then if you take a bit more critical look at it, you can also ask, well, like, would there ever have been posted millions into producing such a movie from or through Hollywood if there hadn't been an agenda behind it? Like, if it would have really sparked a real transformation in our world, would it have ever been allowed to get through? I would say no. The most transformational, for example, documentaries I've seen that really shook me in my core were low budget, completely, and not, it's not to say that it has to be that, but that were not funded by the big you know, the corporate industry or the corporate machinery. And so what I have been looking into, and I'm not the only one who is seeing this, so it's something that you can go and investigate more for yourself, is that this theme with making the revolution against the elite is actually being pushed by people who have an interest in people creating a revolution or trying to fight the system. And we've actually seen the first signs of this in Thailand, where there's been like really brutal demonstrations and clashes between the police and the citizens, where people have used the hand sign from the Hunger Games in protesting against the government. And now this the Mockingjay Part 1 has actually been banned in several movie theaters in Thailand. But what I mean to say is that you're actually seeing now that it is transferring into reality. And what I have seen as a very critical perspective on this, also in relation to what we're seeing in Ferguson, for example, is that there are people in this world who have an interest in citizens creating riots and creating, you know, trying to make revolutions happen, so that the military and the police state can go in and declare martial law and show all the other you know, the people that are not rebelling or rioting, that martial law, for example, is justified, and the police and the military should be given sanction to take more rights. For example, frisk search people on the street without having a cause. This is something that is being debated in the alternative community right now, and that's something that I'm seeing with this kind of movie. And what is interesting also with this movie, specifically in this series, is that you have the female lead character, and you're supposed to identify with her. And that is actually one of the effects that movies can have on us, which is why it's so important that we're critical and that we reflect when we watch things, because it can actually affect the way that we see ourselves, the way that we see the world. And this could indicate, it's a possibility that, you know, there's a like an impulsing, a predictive programming where, you know, the females are invited to become more rebellious, and that's seen as positive. I mean, it's complex,
Yeah.
but basically what's being promoted in the movie essentially is fighting, is violence. Like that's the end of the whole, like the culprit is that you have to fight the system, you have to fight fire with fire. And that's something that I would be cautious and critical towards, not saying that we then just have to accept the system as it is. That's not at all what we're saying, but we're saying that there is a different way.
Yeah. Jürgen, what do you have, anything else to add on that? And thank you very much, Anna, for giving us that heads up.
Actually, Hilda's question actually speaks to that point Anna's sharing. I'd like to.
Oh, cool! There's a question. I don't see the question. Oh,
right. No. Okay. Thank you, Jürgen. Yes. Well, you can read it out loud if you want. Yeah.
So Hilda says, the movies do reflect what is going on in our world, but what they fail to accurately portray is a struggle and the reality that it is us against ourselves, because those soldiers who are defending the system are our brothers, sons, neighbors, friends. Simply they're us. Yeah. Oh wait, did I skip? I think.
Yeah, I did not get any of that.
Yep.
Maybe you can sum it up, Jürgen.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, yeah, what Anne was talking about with the violence points. So you have these movies which are promoting violence, a violent revolution to fight. But if you were to go out there right now, like try to pick a fight with the system, who are you going to end up fighting with? Basically the people that they pay, the policemen, you know, those people who are trained to like fight, who are given all this equipment. And so if you want to pick a fight with someone, you're not going to go up and beat a politician because they're protected by the police. And I mean, if you end up fighting all these people, let's say you end up winning, you know, all you've learned and all you've been good at is fighting. So if then you're going to do the same thing in your new system, you're going to fight against other people, you know. So if you want a new way, really the best way in this world we have today is using your words, you know. Use your words to talk about the situation and get the people who are part of your system, policemen, politicians, and, you know, talk to them. And if you can develop those kind of skills, and then, you know, then all you're going to do is resort to violence, and that's what you end up having at the end, you know. Your input's going to be your output. So.
Something that's actually really interesting with the third movie is that, and because you know that in the first two movies you have the dictatorship media, so it's basically one of those totalitarian situations where the people, because that would be the counter argument to what you say, Jürgen, is that, but we can't get through, you wouldn't be able to talk to them because they're controlling the media. But what's really interesting in the third movie is that there is actually an alternative media being created. And that could be part of the solution, is that you get the real information about what's really going on out to the people. So definitely suggest to go watch it.
Cool. So that will, actually, it's a great point to conclude our session. But just before we go, Anna and Jürgen, one other point that in the movie it's actually not mentioned is anything regarding education. It's all about fighting and violence and physical contact. But if we're actually talking about changing anything at all, we have to start by educating ourselves. And that's exactly what we're doing by bringing these hangouts and sharing these perspectives that otherwise people would not come across, unless obviously each one works on their own selves and then starts publishing blogs and sharing this alternative information and views. So yeah, there's so much to talk about. But we're now reaching the end of the session, so I would like to thank you guys. And just to add, one point that we haven't touched upon was actually the hope that this movie is bringing forward in terms of how these whole games work as a hope. And Anna, while you were talking about it, I could also see that this movie is just another kind of blinded hope that people could take with them, thinking, yes, we can fight, we're going to win or whatever, but it's actually not going to take it anywhere unless we actually change our own nature. So, guys, I want to still give you the floor to. So, any final comments on what we just said, or anything else you want to add before we leave?
Yeah, I would just like to say that I would say that this is actually a very important point to take up. So important, and it's worth going a little bit over time here. Stay with us.
Okay, let's do it.
Yeah, because this point with hope is really being brought up through the movie. And we have that quote from President Snow where he talks about, you know, that the point with the Hunger Games is to give people hope. And so you have this one person that has the chance to win the lottery, you know, again, remember, reflected back to our own reality. And so you have this one person that gets famous, and what do we see in our own reality? You know, people are picked up from the streets, and then they become this amazing soccer player, whatever. And what does that serve to entice within us is hope that if he can do it, I can do it too. But what we don't realize is that that is a deliberate mechanism created by, you know, the system, but I mean not the system as, you know, this evil overlord, because essentially we're all part of it together. Because we're equally, you know, taking part in it. In when we go and buy that lottery ticket, and you know, we hope that this time we're going to win, instead of investigating substantial ways that we can change our reality for ourselves.
Thank you, Jürgen. Your last words on that?
Last words. I don't know. Just following what Anna was saying. I don't think I have any last words. It was pretty cool.
Or in general, just about the movie, any other takeaways that you want to give tonight?
Well, I guess I'll emphasize that when Anna was referring to with the soccer player, so that's what Katniss is. She's like, you know, like in our minds, we're going to perceive there's one person who's going to stand up, and you know, throughout the books, when we look at it, really, it's one person that made all the events happen throughout the book was Katniss. You know, obviously with the help of other people, but it's as if, you know, we sort of pretend that's going to happen in our reality.
Exactly.
Like there's going to be one person, you know, is going to change everything for us, instead of realizing that, you know, in reality, with anything that's changed systems, it's always taken many people, like millions of people, to create the world we have today. So it's the same thing.
That's such a cool point. And also, you know, she's so perfect, and she's so beautiful, and she's so good at everything, and she's not even trying. And then it's like, but I can't be like that, you know? How am I going to do that? When actually, you know, we can actually work together, and you can actually start from wherever it is that you are, the skills that you have. You don't have to save the whole world by yourself. That's not going to happen.
No.
Absolutely, it's a step by step, and that's where we cannot give up. We cannot give up on ourselves and who we are, and see everything that exists, and then take the best and that which supports us. So thank you, guys. We also had a very supportive comment by Marlon. And just before we hang up today, I'm actually going to inform everyone that we're going to add on the description box some links of very interesting interviews that will discuss these points of survival, of the struggle that we live in terms of our minds, and how to deal with our own selves first. And also distribute also some links about the courses that we suggest people to check it out. Next week we're going to be back with another movie, so please stay tuned and subscribe to our channel so that you're always posted on our upcoming events. And next Thursday, Anna is actually going to be live again with another DIP Light Hangout.
Yeah, so we're continuing with the relationship support series. So we're discussing the desire for companionship. That's going to be very interesting.
Great. So we'll leave this hangout with that. Thank you guys for joining us tonight. Thanks for your great perspectives. And yeah, we'll see everyone very soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.